September 28, 2013, Phoenix, Arizona. Thomas Breen is 71 years old. He was born in Brooklyn, served in the Navy, and spent his adult life the way a lot of veterans do, quietly, without much fuss, proud of what he'd done and not particularly interested in talking about it. When he needed a doctor, he went to the VA. Not because it was always easy or close or quick, but because it was his. He'd earned it, and that mattered to him. That morning, there's blood in his urine. He had a history of cancer. His son Teddy and his daughter-in-law Sally don't wait. They put him in the car and drive him to the Phoenix VA emergency room. The doctors examine him, note his history, and do something that's supposed to matter in medicine. They document the urgency. On Thomas Breen's chart, they write that he needs to see a primary care doctor or a urologist within 1 week. Then they sent him home. That's the part that doesn't make sense to his family at first. He'd gone in because something was wrong. The doctor agreed, the chart agreed, and then the answer was, go home and wait, someone will call. No one calls. Sally calls, then calls again the next day, and the day after that. Each time the person on the other end of the phone tells her the same thing, wait a little longer. Someone will be in touch. The VA does schedule Thomas for an appointment, but with a rheumatologist, to look at his prosthetic leg. For the blood in his urine, for the cancer history, for the urgency written into his own chart, he got nothing. No appointment, no call. 2 months pass. Thomas Breen dies on November 30th, 2013. The death certificate lists the cause as stage 4 bladder cancer. A week later, the VA calls with an appointment for Thomas Breen. Sally picks up the phone and says, "You're a little late, sweetheart. He's dead. You guys killed him." Thomas Breen wasn't a casualty of an overwhelmed system. He was a name on a list deliberately designed so that no one in Washington would ever see it. While his name sat there, the administrators who created that list were earning performance bonuses for hitting their targets. The targets they were hitting were fake, but the list holding Thomas Breen's name was real, and he was still on it when he died. This is the story of what they did, who knew, and what it cost. The Department of Veteran Affairs runs on metrics. That's not unusual. Every large institution does. But in the VA, the metric that mattered most for careers was one specific number: 14 days. That was the target. Veterans requesting primary care appointments were supposed to be seen within 14 days. Hit that target, and your facility looked good. Your performance review looked good. Your bonus looked good. Missed the target, and you had problems. In Phoenix, by late 2012 and into 2013, the VA was missing the target. Not because the staff was lazy or incompetent. The demand was real, and the capacity to meet it wasn't there. Veterans who were waiting weeks, then months, just to be seen for the first time. The honest thing to do would have been to report that, push for more resources, or manage expectations. The people in charge chose a different path. What they built was a 2-track system. The first track was the official electronic wait list, the one that got reported to VA headquarters in Washington. That list showed Phoenix veterans being seen within the required window. Clean numbers, compliant numbers, the kind that generated a $9,345 performance bonus for Phoenix VA Director Sharon Hellman in 2013 alone. The second track was the one nobody sent to Washington. Starting in February 2013, when veterans came in requesting care, staff didn't enter them into the official electronic wait list. Instead, their names went onto a separate paper list, later converted to a hidden electronic file. That's where they actually waited. 6 months, 9 months, 13 months, 21 months. Only when a veteran's turn finally came around and their next available appointment happened to fall within the 14-day window were they moved over to the official list. The clock reset, the months of waiting vanished, and Washington's numbers stayed clean. When veterans on the hidden list died, their names were removed entirely. No record of the request, no record of the wait, No record that the VA had ever failed them. They disappeared from the system as if they'd never asked. Dr. Sam Foote, a physician and clinic director who spent 24 years at the Phoenix VA before retiring in December 2013, described the official list this way. It's a sham list. When they did that, they would report to Washington, "Oh yeah, we're making our appointments within 10 days, within the 14-day frame." When in reality, it had been 6, 9, and in some cases 21 months. The people running this system knew exactly what they were doing. In July 2013, an internal email chain circulated among Phoenix VA management after a staff letter went out praising the facility's performance. One staffer pushed back in writing, "I think it's unfair to call any of this a success when veterans are waiting 6 weeks on an electronic waiting list before they're called to schedule their first primary care physician appointment. Sure, when their appointment is created, it can be 14 days out, but we're making them wait 6 to 20 weeks to create that appointment." Sharon Hellman was included on that email chain and defended the practice. Hellman had been running the Phoenix VA since 2012. Before that, she'd been the director in Spokane, Washington, where a VA investigation later found that the number of veteran suicides in the service area had been dramatically undercounted. From July 2007 through July 2008, at least 22 veterans in Spokane committed suicide, though the official count reported only 9. Nobody in VA leadership was held accountable for the gap, and Hellman moved on. Sam Foote wasn't the kind of doctor who looked the other way. He'd spent more than 2 decades at the Phoenix VA watching the system from the inside. The budget pressures, the performance anxiety, the way the culture worked when the numbers started looking bad. He knew what he was seeing, and by mid-2013, what he was seeing was bad enough that he couldn't leave it alone. In July 2013, he filed a complaint with the VA's Office of Inspector General. He laid out the allegations clearly. Veterans were dying, wait times were being falsified, and the fraud was coming from the top. The OIG received his complaint and did nothing. He filed again in February 2014 and got no response. Foote wrote in a note around this time, "Going public would damage an institution I gave more than 2 decades of my life to, trying to make it a better place for veterans to get their care, but I had to be able to sleep at night." So he went outside the system. After retiring in December 2013, he sat down with a reporter at the Arizona Republic and shared what he knew. Before he did, Paula Pendine, the public information officer at the Phoenix VA, a former Navy veteran who'd been working at the facility since 1994, gave him media coaching. She understood how the story needed to be told and was helping him find his footing for what was coming. It's worth holding that for a moment. 2 people who worked inside the institution they were exposing, using their own expertise to make sure the truth got out. They both knew what it would cost them. Pendine was moved to a basement office not long after the story broke. A criminal investigation was opened against her. The VA came after her in ways she had to hire both a criminal defense attorney and a whistleblower attorney to fight. CNN investigative correspondent Drew Griffin had been reporting on VA delays for months before Phoenix broke open nationally. When Foote came forward as an on-record source, the first time he'd appeared publicly, Griffin and his team had what they needed. On April 23, 2014, CNN published the story. The Phoenix VA secret wait list was national news. Then came the detail that took it somewhere darker. Pauline DeWenner was the scheduling clerk at the Phoenix VA. When investigators began reviewing the hidden electronic wait list, DeWenner started noticing something in the records. In case after case where she'd identified a veteran on the secret list as deceased, the entry was changing. Dead veterans were being relisted as alive. Someone was going into the system and erasing the evidence even as the scandal was unfolding. "Somebody is going on that electronic list," she said, "and where people are identified as being dead, somebody is changing that and saying, no, they're not dead." The original list had been built to hide long wait times. Now someone was building a second layer of cover, hiding the fact that people had died on the first list. The cover-up was covering up the cover-up. Once CNN's story ran, the dam broke. Whistleblowers at VA facilities across the country started coming forward. The VA Inspector General opened investigations at 93 sites of care. What they found confirmed what Foote had been saying. Phoenix wasn't an anomaly, it was a symptom. VA facilities in Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and elsewhere were found to have the same practices. In Colorado, staff had been explicitly instructed to falsify records to cover up delayed care. The incentive structure that rewarded the appearance of performance over the reality of it had infected the entire system. The numbers from the national audit were staggering. By June 2014, investigators had confirmed that 57,000 veterans nationwide had been waiting more than 3 months for an initial medical appointment. Another 64,000 veterans had requested care over the previous decade and weren't on any waiting list anywhere. They'd simply fallen off the edge of a system with no reason to count them. That brought the total to over 120,000 veterans who'd asked for help from the institution that existed to provide it. In Phoenix alone, the OIG's final review covered more than 3,400 veterans. They found over 3,500 additional veterans on unofficial lists who were at risk of never obtaining their requested or necessary appointments. Among the 40 confirmed deaths, investigators identified 28 cases where care delays had been clinically significant. 6 of those veterans died. One of them was Mel Allen, a Vietnam veteran. He came to the Phoenix VA for treatment of bladder cancer. The VA's urology department had no doctors qualified to perform the surgery he needed. A referral to an outside hospital was required, but it took 8 months to come through. When it finally did, the cancer had spread beyond the point of treatment. Mel Allen died in March 2014. They killed him, his wife Debbie said, the Phoenix VA. On Senate and House floors, members of Congress began reading names into the congressional record, not as statistics, but as people. Dale Richardson, a Vietnam veteran from East Texas who died of cancer after waiting 2 months for the VA to schedule his chemotherapy. Thomas Breen, Mel Allen. They had all survived combat and come home trusting the system that was built to take care of them. As we discuss and debate all the numbers on wait times and backlogs, one senator said from the floor, it's important to remember these are real human beings and these are our veterans with real individual stories. What Sam Foote thought when he saw those names in the record was this. The number 40 was probably low. The number's actually higher. I would say that 40. There's more than that I know of, but 40 is probably a good number. The political response was as fast as it ever gets in Washington. Both Republicans and Democrats called for hearings, investigations, and resignations. May 2014 became the month the VA leadership fell. On May 16th, Dr. Robert Petzel, the Veterans Health Administration's top health official, retired early at Secretary Shinseki's request. 12 days later, the OIG released its interim report. It confirmed the hidden lists, confirmed the systematic manipulation, confirmed that veterans had died while waiting. 2 days after that, on May 30th, Eric Shinseki resigned. Eric Shinseki was a retired 4-star general who'd lost part of his right foot to a landmine in Vietnam. A man who'd served the country long and honorably, and who'd presided over a system that had enabled and concealed this fraud. In his resignation statement, he said he'd been working to make the changes needed, but had been unable to make them fast enough. President Obama accepted the resignation with considerable regret. He named former Procter & Gamble CEO Bob McDonald, a West Point graduate, as the new secretary, with a mandate to clean house and reform the system. McDonald came in promising accountability, transparency, and urgency. Congress moved faster than usual. Negotiations were led by Senator Bernie Sanders, who chaired the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, and Senator John McCain. The two sides fought over the cost and the scope, but the political pressure was too great for the normal gridlock to hold. On August 8, 2014, President Obama signed the Veterans Access, Choice, and Accountability Act into law. The price tag was $16.3 billion. $10 billion created a Veterans Choice Fund, a new program allowing veterans to see private, non-VA doctors if they couldn't get a VA appointment within 30 days or live more than 40 miles from the nearest VA facility. $5 billion went toward hiring more physicians, expanding staff, and improving VA infrastructure. The law also gave the VA secretary new authority to fire senior executives who weren't performing, including by bypassing the lengthy civil service appeal process that had historically made VA firings nearly impossible to execute quickly. It was the most significant overhaul of VA healthcare in a generation. It happened because people died waiting for appointments that never came. Now here's what accountability actually looked like. The VA moved to fire Sharon Hellman over the waitlist scandal, but in December 2014, an appeals judge at the Merit Systems Protection Board ruled it hadn't made the case. The misconduct was real, the judge said, but what investigators had found didn't support firing her over the waitlist specifically. She was ultimately fired for something else, accepting more than $21,000 in gifts from a healthcare lobbyist. A car, a $5,000 check, concert tickets, airline tickets to various events, and failing to disclose any of it on her required federal financial forms. On March 1, 2016, Sharon Hellman stood in a federal courthouse and pleaded guilty to making a false financial disclosure. The U.S. Attorney for Arizona announced the outcome with a statement that included this sentence: "We do not intend to pursue any additional criminal charges at this time." That was it. The woman who oversaw the secret wait list, who received that internal email in July 2013 complaining that veterans were waiting months to be scheduled, who defended the practice in writing, who collected a performance bonus while the list kept growing. She pled guilty to paperwork fraud on her personal financial forms. For the veterans who died waiting, there would be no criminal reckoning. The acting VA Inspector General had told Congress bluntly that this was the problem. Once someone loses their job or gets criminally charged for doing this, he said, it will no longer be a game. Nobody was, so the game continued. The people who broke the story paid for it. Paula Padin had to hire a criminal defense attorney and a whistleblower attorney to fight off the VA's retaliation. She ended up writing a book about it, called A Sacred Duty, because the story of what was done to her was as important as the story of what she'd help expose. Brandon Coleman, a therapist at the Phoenix VA, went to the media with concerns that suicidal veterans were being discharged without receiving proper care. He was suspended for 460 days on what he described as fabricated charges of assault. It took intervention from the Office of Special Counsel to resolve his case. In Shreveport, Louisiana, a VA social worker named Shay Wilkes discovered that hundreds of veterans had been placed on a secret waiting list at his facility. He turned over the list to prove it. The VA's OIG opened a criminal investigation against him for violating HIPAA by sharing patient names. That investigation lasted a year before it was quietly dropped. The broader accountability picture was no better. In October 2016, the OIG released a new report on the Phoenix VA. 2 years after the scandal broke, 215 veterans had died with open specialist consultation appointments, meaning they'd been waiting for care when they died. In at least one case, a veteran had never received a cardiology appointment that might have caught the condition that killed him. At the time of that report, the Phoenix VA had more than 38,000 open consult requests sitting unaddressed. In 2019, 5 years after the scandal broke, a congressional hearing revealed that the VA still couldn't produce reliable wait time data. Fewer than 1 in 10 VA medical centers was scheduling 75% of its appointments within the required window. Recommendations the Government Accountability Office had made in 2017 and 2018 remained unimplemented. In April 2024, a decade after the story broke, the whistleblowers gathered again in Phoenix VA Medical Center and demanded the reforms they'd been waiting for. They said Congress still didn't have the will to hold the system to account. The VA said it had been working tirelessly to improve access to care. The VA is not a corrupt institution. It's a massive, complicated system staffed by hundreds of thousands of people, most of whom are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. The Phoenix scandal didn't happen because the idea of VA healthcare is wrong. It happened because a specific set of incentives inside a specific bureaucracy rewarded the appearance of success over its reality. And because the people who understood exactly what they were doing continued to do it for more than a year before anyone forced it into the light. And when the light came, it came because people chose to put their careers on the line to make it happen. Sam Foote, who couldn't sleep, Paula Padine, who coached a retiring physician on how to talk to a camera and then fought off criminal charges for it. Pauline DeWenner, who kept watching the dead being listed as alive and didn't look away. Thomas Breen's daughter-in-law, Sally, brought his ashes to the congressional hearing in a wooden box. She wanted the people reading from documents and citing figures to understand what they were talking about. His chart had said urgent, and the VA said wait. He waited until there was nothing left to wait for, and then a week after he was gone, his appointment finally came through. The system that was supposed to honor his service had treated him like a number on a list. And when that number became inconvenient, someone deleted it. I'm Dave. Thanks for watching. If this kind of history matters to you, and I believe it should, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and tell me what story you think needs to be told next. I'll see you in the next one.
Oh, Dave.